Hello and welcome to the BBA Today episode number 108. My name is Ron Collins. I am the general manager of the Bikini Krill in the most powerful, best, well, maybe not most powerful, the best division, Pacific Division in the Brewster Baseball Association. Today, I am extremely lucky. Finally, I've been able to connect the dots with Chuck Valences. Now, am I pronouncing Valences correct, Chuck?
Yes, you are.
Excellent. I even got it right. It's my Indiana, Kentucky tongue. It occasionally gets it right. You are the general manager of the Austin Shredders. Welcome to the BBA Today. This is, I think, your inaugural time on it. So I am so very excited.
It is my inaugural time, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, now I know that you have from some of your posts and so forth. I don't know if the BBA has turned over some general managers in a little bit, every now and again. So I thought maybe it would be a good idea to start this one as we are actually in January. I think January 1st of the season, which means we're right on the cusp. The IFAs are going to be signing. In fact, by the time we're done chatting, perhaps Matt will, if he's early, we may already have IFAs signed. The free agency process has been running along for a little bit, about halfway through development labs and things like that. So I'm definitely interested in getting your thoughts on that. But I thought that maybe it would be a good idea. I know you have quite the interesting what's the term I'm looking for? Broad experience with baseball itself.
Background?
Yes,
Yeah.
background. See, background.
Yeah.
I'm a writer. I will eventually get the word. But the cool thing about being a writer is you don't have to be cool in first draft. So,
It's a bad thing about being a broadcaster is I had to be cool in my first draft.
yeah, tell me more about that. How did you get into doing broadcasting, and where have you been there?
Well, I was a play-by-play broadcaster in the minor leagues for almost 20 years. I didn't take a normal route. I hadn't gone to college. I had actually been after I graduated high school. I had been working in the bar and nightclub industry. I did every job that started with a B, from busboy, barback, bouncer, bartender, bar manager. And then when I was in my early 20s, I kind of realized it wasn't the lifestyle that I enjoyed a whole lot. And I kind of looked back and thought, what do I really love? What do I really want to do? And a lot of it had to do with fathers and sons. My father was a huge baseball fan, and played catch with me in the yard, and got me involved in Little League. And he always loved the sport so much, and so did I. And so I thought working in baseball somehow would be a great way to make a living. And
So how did that work out?
so I thought, well, initially I wanted to be a coach. I'd already by that time, in my early 20s, realized I wasn't going to play. But I thought maybe I could coach or manage. And then I realized, since I hadn't been drafted or gone to college, that was pretty much impossible. So I thought the funnest job I could have in baseball was being a broadcaster. And so I literally went to the library and got a Baseball America directory and started calling around the teams. And I contacted the Kane County Cougars outside Chicago, where I actually grew up. I grew up in Glen Ellen, Illinois. And at the time, I was living in Long Beach, California. And the broadcaster there was a guy named Dave Wills, who, if you're a big fan, he was the broadcaster for many years with the Tampa Bay Rays. But at this time, he was 27, 28, and just starting out in A-ball. And he offered me an internship. And from that internship, I turned that into a job back in California with the High Desert Mavericks. And I was just like kind of an account executive, game day worker. And I had a GM who knew I wanted to get into radio. And she said that if I did a good job with this, that she would give me some time on the air and she would help me find a radio job. And apparently she liked me better than the radio broadcaster she had, because, about 3/4 of the way through the season, she told me, "Listen, I told you I would help you find a radio job, and I think I've done that. You're going to be my broadcaster next year." And so, the Cougars were an Orioles affiliate at the time. When I was with the Mavericks, we were a Marlins affiliate, then a co-op team, and then an Orioles affiliate. And from there, I moved up to AA with the Jacksonville Suns when we were a Tigers affiliate. And after 2 years in AA, I got a job in AAA with the Nashville Sounds, and we were a
Nashville.
Pirates.
Hold
yeah.
on. Oh, no, wait a minute. Okay, hold on. I had to get clear. Okay, go ahead. I've purged that thought. Go ahead. Nashville Sounds.
Okay. The Nashville that I lived in was not full of evil owners and people that nobody wants to trade with. We were a Pirates farm club for the first 7 years, and then a Brewers farm club for the last 5 I was there. And then, so that was about 18, 19 years. And then, working in the minor leagues is a job where it's minor league in every way, including the pay. And I had some interviews with big league teams. I'd been a finalist for a couple of big league jobs. And by this time I was in my 40s, and I kind of, decided, okay, if it hasn't happened by now, it's probably not going to. And since I don't want to die in the poorhouse, I better go and make a living that actually pays. And so, when the team got sold and a bunch of us were let go, I decided to leave baseball, and eventually moved to Cleveland and work in the industry I do now, which is as a manufacturing consultant. And so here we are.
Oh, that's quite a ride. What was what was your favorite and least favorite parts about being a minor league broadcaster? What was the travel like? I mean, did you travel with the team, I assume?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's kind of like when you're in single A and double A and you're a broadcaster, you're like, man, I can't wait to get to triple A or the majors because they fly almost everywhere. And, because in single A and double A, you basically play 142 to 144 games. And, you pretty much play a 4-game series in one city. And if you're on an 8-game road trip, you load the bus up and then you go to the next city. In the California League, it was pretty easy because I think 8 hours was the longest ride you had. In double A, sometimes, you went from Jacksonville to Memphis at the time.
Oh my.
And that was 13 hours and you had to switch drivers halfway through. So that wasn't a lot of fun, but then you get to triple A and you realize that, when you are flying, and I was in the Pacific Coast League, of course we were 7 hours away from the Atlantic Ocean and 2 days away from the Pacific Ocean, but that was the league we were in. You have to get up, there is no, let's see if we can make this flight. If we get there, we'll play the game. If you're playing in Nashville and you have to play Fresno the next day, you are getting on the whole team is getting on the earliest 6 a.m. flight. And generally because it was cheaper, you were changing planes in Dallas, and then you fly to Fresno and you get there maybe about 2:00 in the afternoon after the changeover, and you're playing again at, or in my case, on the air at 7:00.
No, that's brutal.
And if you're going back the other way, you're losing 3 hours, and it's even worse.
Yeah, I assume your sleep.
So that was the bad part. There really wasn't. I mean, it's hard to find a bad thing about working in baseball. I mean, like Willie Stargell. Somebody once asked Willie Stargell if it was tough with all the traveling, and he goes, "I ain't complaining. I asked for this job," and I'm the same way. I made great friends in the cities that we traveled to. Jacksonville is probably still my favorite, or Nashville is still probably my favorite city of all time. Chad notwithstanding. Chad doesn't even know where the Bluebirds name came from. So I had to tell him. Uh, so I make fun of Chad, but he's been really successful. So it's more envy than anything.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, I mean, I loved it. I got to watch baseball every day. Um, the first thing I really learned was how much about the game, even though I played it my whole life, that I had to learn, and really how to recognize pitches. And, a lot of it still carries over today. I mean, if I watch a game on baseball, I'm, I'm predicting pitches, trying to anyways. And, people who, if I go to a game, people are like, wondering why I'm waving down and away a little bit, or raising my hand a little bit to climb the ladder, and what is this guy doing? But
when you watch a game these days, do you find yourself critiquing the broadcasters, or are you thinking about the internal game and what's going on in their ears and things like that? What's your experience like in that sense?
I probably do both. Growing up in Chicago, my two examples were Jack Brickhouse and Harry Carey, and Harry Carey was not exactly the most exacting broadcaster ever. And Jack Brickhouse was great, but you learn to appreciate. Like, I didn't appreciate Tom Hamilton in Cleveland when I first got here. I thought he sounded like he was surprised on every play, and then listen to him for a couple of years, and you're like, okay, this guy's really passionate about it. He doesn't miss a trick. He's great at calling the action, and so now I'm a big Tom Hamilton fan.
Oh, cool. Well, there you go. So how did you move from, I guess what I'll call real baseball? I mean, I have my own personal take on this. Like I think I said before, I know a lot more BBA players than I do real Major League Baseball players anymore. My transition is moderately complete. How did you move from this thing we call real baseball? How did you find Out of the Park? What was your entry into that? And then I guess how did you roll yourself into the BBA? How did you find us?
Well, my first version was probably OOTP 4. In the early 2000s, I believe it was.
Oh, man.
And at that time, I thought it was just an amazing game. And I was kind of getting into more baseball games, for example, like high heat baseball, I was getting into. As a matter of fact, I wound up being the color commentator on the last two versions of that game.
Very cool.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it paid well. It was just a game where it just did everything I had never seen a game do before. And Bill Veeck always said the two things that everybody knows how to do better is run a hotel and run a baseball team. And so in OTP, you get to run a baseball team, and you get to sign the players, you get to make the trades. And I thought at the time it had great AI.
And it did.
Obviously, for that time it did. Yeah.
At the time it was Nirvana, right?
Yeah, it was.
I have a real similar thing. I found Out of the Park 5, and the very first day that I saw it, I went, oh my God. I mean, from the time I was like 10 and 12 years old, I was playing APBA and Sports Illustrated and rolling the dice and spinning the things. And my brother and I kept thousands of sheets of scorecards that we would track all the stats and do all the things, right? And then when I saw this game, as rudimentary as version 5 was, it was still like the golden light lit above me. And I went, yes, this is amazing. So it was fantastic.
You're the only other person I've ever met that played, I think it was called Sports Illustrated Status Pro Baseball.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah, you're the only other person I've ever met that played that game besides myself.
I even had had the all-time All-Star versions, and my brother and I were playing in the back seat of our station wagon as we were driving from Louisville to South Bend one day, and I think it was the Detroit Tigers blew out the window, and so I wrote Sports Illustrated, and I said, "Hey, my brother and I were playing, and the Detroit Tigers blew out the window. Can I get a replacement?" And they literally sent me one.
Yeah, it's a great story. They'll do it. Yeah. So,
So
but
anyway,
yeah, I mean, but OTP, I really only played. I was really just doing. I like to see how the engine would play. Would play 100 years of baseball, and so I would start a lot of leagues and just kind of run them through. And I probably had a couple of years that I missed, but it's only been in the last, I'd say, 2-3 years that I got into online leagues and got into fictional online leagues. I dipped my toes into uh, a replay of Major League Baseball, like modern day, and that was fun. But the league fell apart. But then I joined PBA, the Planetary Expeditionary Baseball Association, or PEBA,
mhm,
which I know has a lot of similarities to the BBA and actually some similar players.
right.
And then since they were, they were simming twice a week, I was looking for something that was going to sim, maybe 2 or 3 more times a week. And I found the BBA and found the article, or really I think it's the podcast on the BBA from years ago, and really it just had a great name. And so I applied and with Chad, and then went through the process with Matt and was awarded the first the Sydney Sharks for a few months, and then the Edmonton Jackrabbits when Mike Neugebauer left.
Yep. There you go.
And now I went and destroyed everything he's ever built and moved all the affiliates and moved the team and changed the logo. And
Yes, which I must reiterate when we first hopped on and I saw Chuck with his fantastic Austin Shredder's background. You've raised your game. You're completely in. I'm going to have to rethink my BVA background share as we go forward on more podcasts. On the other hand, if I do that, then I would be way too professional.
my goal is to get an animated background of me just walking around myself in the back, and that's
I like that. They have you in the background kicking the dog or
dragging a body bag.
Put a little Phoenix Talon symbol on him. How's that, right?
There we go. Yeah,
So
I make a lot of fun. I know Sean did a great job with that team, but I make a lot of fun of Phoenix because I think it's just kind of a strip mall of a town.
Yeah, that's and that is a shame for me personally because I was actually born in Scottsdale in Phoenix, but I was only there for a year or two when my mom and dad moved us off to Virginia, and so I was very excited. My quick 1 or 2 points. I went back to Phoenix as a young man after first getting my first job and traveling for business. And I was so excited to get to Phoenix to check it out, to see who I was. And I very much loved the Arizona State campus. It was fantastic. It was January. I was 24 or so. It was January, and all the young kids were out there running around in their halter tops and their short pants. And I went, oh, this is cool. Glad I didn't go here. I would have never graduated.
Arizona State's got a lot of nice co-eds. Yeah.
There you go. But then when I came, I didn't really know a whole lot about it. So I actually moved to Tucson for about 6 years to be with my mom and dad. And I was highly disappointed because I'd zipped through Phoenix a few times and I saw it's basically just a big concrete heat sink out in the middle of the desert.
I like to say about Phoenix, if they have a Catholic diocese, it's between a Blimpies and a nail salon. So.
Well, there you go. So I guess we can hate on Phoenix all that we want. That's all good with me. But it is a personal shame, and it is fun to hate on.
That'll be my second appearance. Yeah.
Phoenix is the second most fun team to hate on, right after Nashville, because Sean.
Well,
is so
we always hate on the people who win. Yeah.
Sean is so fun.
He is, and he did do a great job building that team.
Yes, he's a fantastic general manager and constantly fiddling with his team and enjoying it, and He may be the very best storyteller, actually, when you really get right down to it. He doesn't go in bulk, but when he gets on a run, if you have not spent hours reading through his team newses over the years, when he gets on a run, it can be just amazing. So, but you can say that about a lot of our
I'm going to
general
have to
managers.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you can say that about a lot of our general managers. You're sitting here in Austin now. You did take Austin and rebranded them Austin. Talk to me about the Shredder's name and where that came from, and then maybe we can get into what your thoughts are going into this year, right?
sure. Nothing against Edmonton, which is actually a great city. Uh, I j- I was just in a situation where looking back on the history of the team, they hadn't been winning for a long time. They hadn't been drawing, and the fan interest just seemed to be just anchored in the low 50s. And it didn't seem like there was much of a way out. And I did want to put my own stamp on the team. Um, I was a little hesitant to do it, and Matt said, well, just go ahead and move them. And so I decided to move them to Austin. And since I am a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, as well as a Sixth Avenue fan when I've been down in Austin, uh, Stevie Ray Vaughan being possibly the greatest guitarist of the last 20 or 30 years, in my opinion. I named them the Shredders after some shredding on a guitar. And yeah, and that's how the Austin Shredders came about.
There you go. No,
So
Stevie Ray is
I
awesome.
built a ballpark, and yeah.
Yep, Stevie Ray is awesome. He's in the pantheon.
Yes, he is.
I always love it whenever anyone talks about somebody, especially in a creative field, but even in baseball, who is the greatest X, right? Who's the greatest guitar player who ever lived? I mean, throw 10 of them all together.
If you talk to GMs, yeah, we could have 32 different answers. So,
right,
yeah.
Right, and all of them will be right. So,
yeah, exactly.
But in that sense. So, the Shredders had a pretty solid year last year. I mean, it seems like you have been on a bit of a build streak. Maybe give me some thoughts about as you moved into Austin. I know you were struggling with finances a bit. Talk to me about your journey to respectability and actually competing for a playoff slot.
Well, we did go 81 and 81 the first time. The team's been at 500 for I think 9 seasons, and it was really a case of I tried a few different approaches. Like I was when I first took over Edmonton, I was trying to trying to build up the offense, trying to build up the pitching. I actually thought I had a couple of really good pitching prospects in the rotation, and one of them never developed, and the other one actually finally did develop. Masad Amir, I think it is, has had 2 solid seasons as a starter now. In the first, I think, 4 seasons I had him, he just, he almost got released. But, I really had to learn a lot about how to build a team in the BBA, because the GMs in this league are of a very high caliber, and you're not gonna. It's not easy to pull one over on them.
It's really hard to win here. It is really hard to win here. All right.
It's very hard, and so I knew I was going to have to build from the ground up, and so the first thing I did was start hiring the best coaches I could, and start looking at my minor leagues more and more, and trying to draft the best players I could, and make sure that I wasn't trading away prospects, and combing the waiver wires, minor league free agents, what have you, and really just slowly but surely. And I'm not really sure I built it the right way. Some of the guys that I had picked in the first round and the second rounds continued to develop, and so my team is mostly made up of guys I picked in the first and second rounds. A number of them were guys that were picked in Mike's last year or two. Mm-hmm. But you look at Herrera's a number one pick, and uh, Komatsu's a number one pick in right field. Let's see, Augusto Perez is one of my fourth round picks. Shortstop is somebody I traded. I think I traded a first round pick to get Jerry Woodall in center field. I traded to get Jorge Madrid at short. Third base is still a kind of a hole, and catcher's kind of a patchwork. But Harry Bransington was a first round pick. Amir is Musad Amir.
I understand. I
is a
need to
first round
stop you
pick.
there
Yeah.
because I understand Harry Bransington really wants to pitch in bikini. That's what I understand. So go
Well,
ahead.
he's tried to tell me that, and that's when I hang up on him. So yeah, that's. I was very fortunate. I think I got Bransington with the 6th overall pick, and he was the first pitcher picked. And I think that it's the only time I've been able to take advantage of other GM's mistakes. And the guys who were drafted ahead of him were, obviously first round talent, but Bransington was exactly what the Shredders needed, an ace starter who has developed and continued to perform over his 3 seasons. And, I think he's probably the biggest reason that this team got to 500.
There you go. Well, now, for some of the newer guys who are coming in, because there have been some guys that came in after you, you've been, you have known of OOTP for a long time. You've been using the engine. You've been in Major League, online leagues. You've been in the PBA, now the BBA. Do you feel like if you were giving anybody advice on how to come into the BBA, coming out of the GBC into the BBA, as a first-time BBA owner, is there anything different about us? And the answer no is fine, but is there anything that you would have liked to have thought through differently as you first started here in Edmonton/Austin?
I think the big thing is to have a longer term plan, especially for a draft strategy. So, in fact, like my first 3 draft picks were all outfielders. And, and now I'm in a position where, I've traded one of them and one of them is sitting on the bench. And the other one, worked out. Jorge Herrera worked out really well. And Komatsu was actually one of Mike's draft picks from 57. But if I had to do it over again, I think the key to realize where the value positions are, and it is obviously pitching. It is obviously defense up the middle, center field, shortstop, catcher. And I think those are the things that you have to look out for first. And to keep drafting those, because if you wind up with 2, defensive whizzes at shortstop that can hit 220 even, you've got a starting shortstop and you've got a valid piece of trade bait that somebody's going to pay for. Same thing in center field. And if you can basically build that center field, that up the middle defense and using top round, if you're using top picks, say first 5 or 10 picks, and you can build through that, when you are ready to compete, you're going to be able to find corner outfielders and first basemen just pretty much lying on the sidewalk, and that are good enough to play. You're going to have to treat pitching the same way, because it's not easy to develop pitching, and I have found in this league, especially, the difference, I think one of the big differences between this league and another league is that in the draft, there really is 1, maybe 2 surefire, 100% starters that come out every year, and that's it. And if you don't get one of those guys, you're going to have to, spend some effort to develop the guys that you do get. And I think that, you have to realize that you are likely not going to get an 80 starter or even a 60 starter
Mhm.
or even a 50 starter potential starter every draft. Depending on where you're at, if you're drafting below 10th, it's very likely that the best starter you get is going to have a potential rating of 45. And same thing, you might find a closer that's in the bottom half of the draft that's a little bit higher. And you could probably find an outfielder first baseman that's a bit higher too. But don't, and I haven't been great at this, but don't poo-poo a 50 starter because he's not, Sandy Koufax right out of the gate. You're going to have to spend some time and effort to develop them. And also realize that, we're seeing now that, older pitchers, for example, like Bernie Stewart, who's 40 years old, had a great season last year.
He did.
He's got a less than 5 stuff. He's got, fairly average movement, but he's got good control. And so, it's not just, there isn't just one way to build a rotation. And you've got to have some faith that some of the guys that may not have the best ratings have performed and they could still perform for you.
Yeah. No, I think I continue to be somewhat critical of the more recent overall development engine issues, right? And to be fair, it is probably fair to say that the engine may well be just fantastic, but it is very different from the engine that I grew up with, and so it feels wrong, right? Now, that
Yeah.
having been said, one of the things I'm going to riff on of your thoughts there about finding elite talent in certain roles, right? Yeah, corner outfielders you can find kind of a dime a dozen, but it's really hard to find a corner outfielder who can also defend. I can tell you that's one of bikini's Achilles' heels. I can find guys who can hit, but I can't find very many
Right.
who seem to be able to defend. But the other aspect that I think is coming to my brain is looking at those elite positions, the center field, the little feature that I wrote up about average plays, plays above average with different depth of whatnot is really interesting to
Yeah.
me because
Let's find a 10 range center fielder, I think was the title of it.
yeah, the 9 range center fielder, yeah.
Yeah, a good article.
The thing that I think the dynamic that's going on, and it's probably very much appropriate in context of this other thing we call real baseball, is you can probably find enough really good, maybe not elite, but good center fielders to staff about 20 teams. Right? And those
Yeah.
bottom 10, though, are really struggling because in order to get a good center fielder, you're going to have to give up a whole bunch because nobody else is going to trade one of their good ones, right? So then you have to start
Right.
playing, mixing and matching skill sets. In the conversation that we had there on that thread about Louisville's center fielder, right, was down in the bottom 3 or 4 defensively, but he created 52 runs or 57 or some, so there's
Yeah.
actually somebody like that. You could say, okay, well, he's lifted himself up into the acceptable range, but you don't know that until you play him. And if you look, since we had the advantage over other real general managers, real players don't come with blue bars and green bars and and that kind of
Right.
ratings. Although I'm certain that the
Yeah.
analytics departments of the teams today have something that is equivalent, right?
I totally agree. I mean,
Yeah.
my center fielder I got from Louisville. He was, that was his backup, Jerry Woodall. And, when I traded for him and I had to give up a bit, including, I gave up a former first round pick who, unfortunately, for Louisville hasn't really developed. But I knew that I was giving up a lineup spot pretty much. Jerry Woodall plays really good defense in center field, but he also hits 210, 220.
Right. So actually, I think those, if I recall right, those are actually almost identical values, though. I mean, if you use my weak-assed estimating methods, right?
Right. Yeah.
But those are the kinds of things that obviously, if you follow me at all, those are the things that intrigue me. I love trying to get in and trying to figure out what values really are and all that other good stuff. So I appreciated your conversation about thinking about values and long-range plans and so forth in the draft in particular.
Yeah, and here's a question for you, and I've been thinking about it generally, but I wonder, you have a problem where if you have say a 7 range or even 8 range center fielder, you usually have negative zone rating, which is the stat that I rely on for defense in the outfield. But could you wind up making up for that by having two, like by having 8 range outfielders all the way around, or even 7 range outfielders in left, center, and right that can all hit? Like, would they actually cover a center fielder's deficiency in range?
Yeah, I've tried to figure out ways to really answer that question. My gut says that they are all independent things, right? But if you look at out of the park, it's a valid question because those using center field and left field or at third base and shortstop, right? There's the gap zones, right? There's for left field and center field. There's the 7-8 zones. My little feature I wrote up was all about the 8 zones because those are all center fielders. Unless there's some weird thing happening with outfield shifts, you're never going to see a left fielder or a right fielder fielding balls in the 8 zones, right? Something I should actually look up to be sure how often that happens.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, because maybe as soon as the game engine decides right off the bat, as soon as the ball leaves the bat, who the outfielder is going to be.
Yeah, I don't think that it works exactly that way, but it's fair enough. I believe that the game works by identifying a series of things, and the first thing, once it's a batted ball that already kind of knows whether it's supposed to be a hit or an out, I believe it then says where it's going to land, and then it applies the defensive adjustments and so forth, right? One of the things that Alan is often getting into is that there's a lot more to the game than just, the 5 offensive ratings and the 5 pitcher ratings, right? And that is true.
Well, she let us in on those.
I mean, it is true that there is more to that, but those are the baselines where everything begins to get adjusted from, right? So at the end of the day, my personal belief is that a 8 or 10 ranged right fielder does not specifically make a 8 range center fielder better. Or vice versa, a 10 range center fielder does not make a 4 range left fielder better. I don't know that that's true, right? The one thing that I would love to see, and that I keep harping on the developers for, is in the game logs, please tell us when the infield and outfield has shifted, because there's no way for us as online GMs to know. If you're watching the game live, right? If you watch the replays, you can see the shifts, I guess. But otherwise, there's no way to know. So I don't know. That's a belief that I have, but I don't know that it is true that they are independent.
No. Maybe it's something to ask the developers. Hey, can do high range corner outfielders make up for lower range center fielders?
Yeah, I mean it's a fair.
I have a feeling you may be right about it.
Yeah, I have a tendency to ask them lots of those questions, and they have a tendency to not really answer my question, which you understand. I mean, it's their proprietary, proprietary deal. So. The right way to ask that question in real life, you'd say, does a Jim Edmonds range stretch far enough to overlap with a left fielder's range, right? And so analytics, real life analytic people probably know the answer to that question for each one of the center fielders that play in real life. They know they know how fast the player is these days with all the methods of metrics, right? They know what routes the players
Yeah.
take and
They know exactly where the
percentages
balls
and
go,
right,
and
all
yeah.
that other good stuff. So they're smart people. I'm relatively certain they know the answer, but as far as out of the park is concerned, I have no idea. So, what are you thinking about? Bring it down into 2065 now, since it's New Year's Day. What are you thinking about out of the park? Brewster Baseball Association, Austin Shredders off season so far. What are you expecting going forward, and how are you thinking about the level of competition in the Frontier Division? We talk a lot about. Obviously, I talk a lot about the Pacific Division. Talk to me about what your thoughts are on the Frontier this year.
Well, I think the Frontier Division it's gotten competitive in that it now has two really strong teams in Las Vegas and Phoenix, and Phoenix was the best team in the BBA all year last year, and
12-0, baby.
again, yeah, I mean they won I think 102 games. Las Vegas is always strong. The Shredders came in third, and we are hoping to try and get a wild card this year. Part of me suspects that last year may have been a bit of a mirage. We had the fifth best rotation in the Frontier League last year, and I don't think we had fifth best rotation talent. It pretty much relied on Harry Bransington, Massar Ahmed. Again, Bernie Stewart had a great season, went 13-9 with 3.93 ERA, which is great for the BBA. Something else I had to get used to. I want my pitchers to all have low 3 ERAs, and you just don't see that in this league. But Bernie Stewart could have another really solid year. He could keel over from a heart attack because he's 40. So, you never know.
Keep him away from the
And
barbecue table.
exactly, yeah. And we had we kind of had a below average offensive year, even though actually I think our talent offensively is better than our statistics indicate. And we did take a step back defensively last year after improving 2 years ago with the trades that I made. It seemed like those trades didn't really uh, last. The improvement didn't really last more than a year. We still had a lot of trouble up the middle. I think we led the league in errors, or at least King. I think we led the league in errors at second base. I think we were close to it at shortstop, and we definitely led the league in errors at first base. I think we doubled the next competitor. And so, we have to figure out a way to, stop the ball or deflect it to somebody who can.
Sounds like it would be an interesting team to be a broadcaster for.
I think it would be a frustrating team to be a broadcaster for, but yeah, we can blame it on scorekeepers, I guess. But I think that we have some work to do. We are not a wealthy team and didn't have a lot of money to spend, and so I made a comment in Discord that what I'm seeing, and I think you've talked about this in past podcasts, but we have so many teams that are so flush with cash because they're not signing, they're not signing a whole bunch of veteran players that, there are some teams that are just blowing people out of the water with gigantic 1-year offers or offers that, just de-escalate over 2, 3, 4 years. So, for example, I was in the running for, I think it's Juan Salas, who's a pretty good second baseman, and I offered him like 3 years at like 10 or 11 million, and that was going to be my big free agent get. And Valencia came in; they had 22 million for 1 year, and blew my offer away. But he had the money, so it's got to be. I'm trying to find players on the margins who can hopefully fill a hole. I did sign my second choice, Jose Molina, to play second base, and he's not bad defensively. He'll probably hit about 220 offensively. Um, but yeah, I mean, I still have holes to fill. I need to find an everyday third baseman. I need to find some bullpen arms. I had the fifth best rotation, but my bullpen was ranked 13th. And it showed. I mean, I've got a closer, and that's really about it. So, I definitely have some holes to fill. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that's the challenge of going from competitive to really competitive is a fun is a fun set of twists. And the other thing that I was thinking about on the finances, another nuance that is creating some of this is while players are young and therefore salaries there's a lot of min-sal, payrolls are relatively low. The other thing that is happening is that we're coming right off a time period where costs were quite high. 3, 4, 5 years ago, costs were high, and bonus cash was getting drained. Now all of the teams are getting so flush that those bonus cash piles are beginning to pile up. And so, for example, Bikini, I was containing my spending fairly heavily until the last 2 years because, last year I spent $30 million on an IFA. This year I spent $30 million on a player. The point there is at this stage my bonus cash is now so high that if I do end up not spending my money, then my owner gets it, right? So I don't want to give it to the owner. And I think we're finding not only are teams' revenue streams going up, but with some of the helpful adjustments that the board made on the finances, reducing stadium fees for a bit and whatnot, the money has come up now. So you're getting this perfect storm of things happening that, the big front loading of contracts is a thing. It will be interesting to see how long that lasts.
Right.
And that's an important thing. It could be an important thing, I think, because if you're thinking that's the right thing to be doing 2 years from now, you might get yourself into some trouble, because if you way overspend and you suddenly hamstring your finances again because you're thinking that was a good idea, because that's been the practice for a year or 3, right? I don't know.
And you are so subject to whatever the next development engine does to the game.
Right.
That it's like, if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes.
There you go.
And if you don't like how your players are progressing, wait for the next engine. But,
right. We all have recency bias and the things that we're thinking about, and all that other good stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Well, I think we've.
I do tend to find that, like, my highest paid players are generally my worst. Guys that when I was in Edmonton and I signed a guy like Socrates, Knetz, and Ekis for like $9 or $10 million. I think it went from like 9 to 12, and he had one good year and suddenly regress offensively and defensively, and I couldn't wait to get him off of my roster.
Yeah, or that's also a remnant that happens when you're signing big name players to 6-year contracts, right? Is
right.
You're essentially overpaying at some point. Well, you're hoping you're not, but that there's a pretty high risk that if you sign a 31-year-old hitter to a 6-year contract, that those last 2 to 3 years could wind up being a little bit ugly. So
they are, and I'm probably a little bit too gun shy in that area now, but I haven't really taken too many risks like that. I think the only one I may have is with Brent Gilbert, and that one's actually paid off over the last couple of years. Although I was worried last year because he had a horrible year 2 years ago, was injured to start the year and missed the first few weeks, and then he came back and just completely tore it up. But even led the league in stolen bases. But
yeah, and sometimes it's also just an element of, are you willing to to pay the price to have fun, right? That's
Yeah, that's true.
The league is very full of general managers who are extremely competitive and extremely knowledgeable, and they kind of ebb and flow. I mean, for example, right now, Aaron Weiner in Jacksonville is on a bit of a low energy pitch. Jim Roberts in New Orleans is at a low energy pitch. They're trying, they're paying attention, but they're not as in depth as they were. If you go back and look at their histories, they have won a lot of games. They know how to do their thing, right? So there are enough.
So that may actually be the only surefire winning strategy, is to affect the other GM's personal lives.
There you go.
And like, hey, if you want to knock Nashville off the top,
now you're talking.
Make sure Chad gets fired.
Talking like a real Chicago mob boss.
Yeah, and make sure Chad experiences family tragedy and gets fired or something.
There you go.
Yeah, so sometimes I think that might be the only way to beat some of these GMs, because they are so good.
There you go. Well, we've been kind of jabbering for a bit here. Probably ought to be winding it up. You got anything else specific that you would like to chat about, or questions on your mind, or statements you want to make for Frontier fans?
Take it away. Well, I think I'm probably going to do. Well, I am going to do the Frontier League preview again for the media guide.
Which are fantastic, by the way.
Or I'm sorry, the Frontier Division rather. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think you're, at least in our division, you're looking at Phoenix just continuing to club other teams to death while only allowing them to score 2 or 3 runs. I watched the series as Matt was simming it, and I mean, they won every game in the postseason, and they pretty much won them all by the 3rd inning. It was just, he just absolutely clubbed the Bluebirds to death. But I think he's going to be even better this year. I think that Las Vegas did make some really good moves. They're going to be stronger. I think possibly, I wouldn't be surprised if Boise makes some moves and has a better year. I think Calgary very well could wind up being above 500 again, and actually probably, I wouldn't be surprised if they finished ahead of me. The teams that, they're the teams that I'm going to be watching. Like everybody else, I'm going to watch how Cobble Hill does in the other division, because I think that Schulis, like when I looked at his roster when we were competing for a wild card spot, I looked at his roster, I'm like, how did he do this? He traded for good young pitching and good young players that are going to be there forever. And I mean, there are guys that I would have drafted in the 1st round, and he managed to, to basically ship guys that he didn't want anymore off to secure them. Mm-hmm. So, I think that I wouldn't be surprised if Cobble Hill takes the this is how clueless I am. I can't even remember the name of the other division, but
the Atlantic.
So it takes the Atlantic Division this year and goes into the playoffs, and does well. But I think Phoenix is going to win the league.
One of the traits that Schulis has that is quite admirable, I think, for a general manager of all ilks, out of the park or not, is he has a tendency, in my opinion, to look at his players and say, this is a really good player, but he does not play the game the way I want to play it. So I'm going to trade this really good player for 1.5 guys who play the game the way that I like it, right? Because other people don't value the game the way that I like it so much. So he's trading value for the players who he wants, who fits his concept of how to play the game, which is quite fun and quite amazing. So.
Right. And, looking at the teams that he built when he was the GM in Sacramento, which were guys that, pretty much played good defense, had good contact, not a lot of power, and generally, I think had fairly good speed, although Cobble Hill didn't really but guys that make good contact, what have you, and he was basically building teams on talents that didn't have as much value to the rest of the GMs.
There you go.
It's pretty much playbook Moneyball. Find an underappreciated area of the game that you can build a team around and get more value out of, and I think that's exactly what he's done at both places.
There you go. Alrighty. Well, thank you for your time here this evening. I'm really excited that we've been able to get together again. Get together for the first time.
And I really appreciate you asking me on. I know I've read a lot of what you've wrote on there, and in some ways rely on quite a bit of what you write to help me judge my team and what have you. And but yeah, good luck to Bikini this year.
Thank you.
Good luck to every other division except mine, except for the Shredders. I hope everybody has a great season. Doesn't get too frustrated when they get outbid for their free agents, and may everybody get good player development and more fan interest, I guess. I don't know.
All righty. Well, thanks so much, and have a great day. We'll look forward to checking out what happens with the IFAs today, and good luck to everyone.